Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here. In today's video, I'm going to go over my recommendations for best NES emulators on Android for August 2017. Before we get started, I would like to let you know that most people's cell phones do differ, so your experience may differ depending on the phone you have. That's why I'm going to recommend a few. Feel free to go through and check them out and choose which one works best for you. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so the first emulator on my list is the Nostalgia.NES. There are two versions of this emulator. This one right here, which is the Nostalgia.NES, and then there is a Pro version, which is ad-free. The Pro version will run you $4.49 in Canada. If you are in the US or anywhere else in the world, the price might be different. And the free version here, which is the regular version, does contain ads. So if you want ad-free, Nostalgia.NES Pro. If you want ads and don't want to pay anything, then just get the regular Nostalgia.NES. Now, I will say I highly recommend trying this out before you buy it. So just download the regular Nostalgia.NES, try it out. If it works, great. If you really like it, then feel free to pick up the Pro version. The reason I recommend this emulator, actually there are a few reasons I recommend this emulator. First and foremost is it's extremely easy to set up. All it does is, once you start it up, is it searches for the ROM files on your phone. You can actually just select the ROM file right there and start playing right away. So if you are a no-frills kind of person, if you want something that's very quick so you can start playing your NES games, this emulator is for you. The UI, so the graphical interface on this, the menus are very, very simple and straightforward and very good looking. The styling on this is great. The games run very, very well. This is a very hassle-free emulator. That being said, if you are more of a tech-savvy person, you might want to stay tuned for one of my other recommendations, but if you just want something nice and simple that works, I highly recommend this emulator. I actually use this emulator quite a bit. It works with my Bluetooth controller as well. I have no issues with it. I really like it. Alright, let's get to the next one. Alright, the second emulator I recommend is the John NES. There are two versions of this emulator, the Nes Lite, which is the free version and it contains ads, and then just the regular John NES, which is a paid version. It costs $2.99 in Canada. Again, your price will differ based on where you are in the world, and it is ad-free. I really like this emulator. I highly recommend it. If you don't like the graphical interface of the Nostalgia.NES or the simplicity and want a few more options, then John NES Lite is the emulator for you. So this one has a few more options than the Nostalgia.NES. It works extremely well. It's by the same maker who makes the John SNES emulator, which is also amazing. No surprise there, I guess, because they're both called John NES and John SNES. But this one is really great. It's very simple, very straightforward, very easy to use. The menus are a little more complicated than the Nostalgia.NES, but at the same time, once you get this up and running with minor configuration, it works like a dream. Alright, let's go to the next one. Alright, so my third recommendation is for the more tech-savvy person out there. I would say that the Nostalgia or the John emulators probably will suit the needs of mostly everyone. However, if you do like a ton of options and tinkering around with things, then this emulator is for you. So it is called the ClassicBoy. There are ads in it, and there are a ton of systems that this emulates. So I'll take a look at the page right here. You can see that from the page, there's the PS1, N64, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, NES, Sega Genesis, and SNK Neo Geo. Now I will say that this emulator does require some configuration to get going. It doesn't necessarily run smooth right out of the gate. This emulator is really for someone who wants an all-in-one solution. However, I highly recommend the Nostalgia or the John NES emulators, and avoid this one unless you like to fiddle around with things. Alright, for my last recommendation, I'm going to look at RetroArch here. Now, This is for the most technical savvy people here. It requires even more skill to use than ClassicBoy. There is a lot of configuration to do in this emulator itself because it is also a all-in-one solution. So it has the power to run multiple systems, but each one requires a lot of configuration. So once you can get this up and running, it runs very well, but I will say that Nostalgia and John are probably the two NES emulators that you should stick with, and I would probably stay away from ClassicBoy or RetroArch just because they can be frustrating at times to get working correctly. Now, those are my recommendations. If you have any recommendations, please leave a comment below. I would like to know and to check them out. I did look at a ton of different NES emulators, so if your favorite one's in here, I may actually not have forgot it, it just didn't make the list for one reason or another, and again, I'd be happy to elaborate down below in the comments. So these are my recommendations. First and foremost, stick with either Nostalgia.NES or John NES. If you like to tinker around or need to tinker around if you're on a slower device, feel free to check out ClassicBoy or RetroArch. That's all I've got for today. Thank you, everyone. Take care.